Hi guys, thanks for joining me tonight. Super excited to show you what I've made this week, and hope you find the tutorial useful. As you can see, I've made the cover for the Maker. I've used Cricut fabric, which I'll talk about shortly, and where you can get it and how much I used and so forth, how much it costs, etc. I've got one pocket down the end. The pattern does come with two, one down this side, one down the other side. I only wanted one, so I just used the one pocket for the tools, just to show you what that process looks like and how to attach those. The one thing that I didn't do that I would normally do is, because this is effectively fully machine washable, and on the fabric I can still see some of the numbers that the Cricut drew, so I will put it in the wash, but whenever I sew a project that's going to be washed, I always like to pre-wash the fabric. So I would recommend doing that first. If you do that, if you're washing with raw fabric where the threads can effectively come untangled and potentially get jammed in your washing machine and so forth, I would absolutely recommend using a laundry bag just to keep it all sort of together. So give it a wash, give it a dry, and then get started. Can't wait to see you guys make these on the group. Make sure you post a picture. If you've got any questions or any comments, you can leave those and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. But happy making! Alright, so let's get started. I've printed out the instructions, which is really important. I thoroughly recommend having a read of those before you start. And then in terms of the tools that I'm using today, I've got my cutting mat from Cricut. I'm actually going to use one of the Cricut sampler packs. Now, these are available at Craft Online, and I think this one at the moment's less than $30. What's great about these packs is that they all coordinate with each other. So I don't think I'm going to have quite enough fabric to do the exact requirements of the pattern, but because these go so well together, I'm just going to use up whatever I need in order to complete the project. And I really like this colorway and also the geometric design. For the lining fabric, I've just grabbed something from my stash. It's really hard to see. I will share a photo, but this is plain white. But what's great about it is that it does actually have a really fine butterfly and floral design sort of imprinted in it. I've got my fabric pen, and this is really important because the Cricut will write some of the cutting lines and number all the different pieces for us. I've got some elastic, so 1/4 inch elastic. I only had 1/2 inch, so I've just cut a 6-inch piece in half. I am only going to make one pocket because, to be honest, I actually didn't want to make any pockets, but I really just wanted to show you the process. So I've cut out obviously the 2 halves, but I'm only going to use one piece, and we'll talk about that when we're actually putting it together. I've got my Cricut fabric scissors, and what I love about these is that they actually have on the blade fabric written on them, which is great because no more excuses, family. Don't use my sewing scissors to cut paper. I've also got a spare pair of Cricut cutting scissors, which I just used to cut my fine threads. I've got Wonder Clips. These are really great, a great alternative to pinning. Really handy for quilting, really handy for bulky things as well. And I've also got some needles. So if you're ever wondering when you should change your needle in your machine, between every project I put in a new needle. Also, I've got these labels I just thought I'd share. I've got these cute labels that I add to my sewing projects. These guys I found, I think, on Etsy, but if you're interested, super cheap. You get about 70 for not much at all, and they just make your sewing projects look uber professional, which is awesome. Of course, I've got my fabric grip mat, which you can see is incredibly well used. I may swap this out once if it doesn't work, but I've used this many times and it hasn't let me down yet. I do have a spare, so if I need to, I'll pull that out. The Maker, of course, which we're making the dust cover for, and one of the tools that you will need, of course, will be the rotary blade. So this is definitely a Maker only project. What I can suggest to you if you're interested in making it for one of the Explore series, is you could absolutely cut out the pattern on with cardstock, and then you could use that as a template to cut out your fabric. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my sampler pack. I'm going to cut out the main lining piece because that needs to be larger than matte. I'm going to iron all of those, and then I'll come back and I'll just explain all the different pieces that we've got. So here we have the fabric all laid out. It's worth mentioning as well that these fabrics, Cricut have actually got together with Riley Blake for their fabrics. So those of you who quilt or do a lot of sewing, you'll know that brand or those designers. So it's very high quality and very sort of renowned. So really lovely product. So I've got the 5 of the samples. What's also great about these is that they're already cut to fit on the mat, which is fantastic. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm just going to keep using them until I cut all the various pieces that are required. And then I've got my large lining piece and then a couple of other pieces that will be used to cut pockets and various other pieces. So now we're going to get started with the cutting, and I will show you that. While it is cutting, I'm going to show you me loading, the actual cutting process and unloading. I'll probably speed up, cut it out little bits and pieces because that is going to be super boring. All right, wish me luck with my super well used mat. And my maker's asked me to do a couple of things. So first of all, I'm going to put my fabric marker. Now if you didn't know already, if you are putting pens into the Cricut, hold down the base just with a finger, just so that when you push it in, you're not pushing down on the mechanism. So I'm going to close that, and of course it's asking me to take out my fine point blade and pop in my rotary blade. If you put in the wrong one, it will actually tell you. I'm just going to pop that in. So this is part of the adaptive tool system, which the maker is famous for. So pop that on there. And then we'll load up the fabric and start cutting. It goes right side down, so the pretty side onto the mat. I have ordered a brayer, but it hasn't arrived yet, so I'm just going to smooth it out with my hands, and we'll load that into the Cricut. So another good tip as well, when you are loading any of your mats, if you curl it up just gently and press the load button, that'll give it enough pressure just to make sure that it feeds in correctly. I'll select cotton as my material type, and then we'll click the Cricut C. See the magic happen, just peeling off all those pieces, all the scraps on the floor, and you can see that the Cricut has drawn the number, cut it out beautifully, likewise for these pocket pieces as well. There's some areas to indicate where the pleat's going to go, and again it's numbered all the pieces so we know based on the instructions exactly where everything's going to go together.
Hello, so that guy that was talking, he was my dad, and he's a famous cricket club person.
What's your name?
Leighton.
Say hi everyone.
Hi everyone.
And bye everyone.
And bye everyone, I'm Paul's son.
Okay, so now we've got our pocket pieces cut out. You can see the numbers on there and the lines have been drawn as well. We've got our exterior 2 pieces with the primary in the middle. Just loving this combination. And I've got my 2 external side pieces and then the internal side pieces with the lining fabric as well. So I used 4 of the sample pack, but I totally had enough fabric where I could have cut these 2 side pieces out of one from each of these colours, but I really love the orange and I thought that would just make it a really nice pop on the edge of the dust cover. So I think it would have cost about $18 in fabric, plus obviously the lining fabric from my stash. So now what we're going to do is we're going to sew the top piece, the exterior piece, together. So we're going to put these right sides together and sew 1/4 inch, and then we'll do the same with this side as well. So I'm going to pin that together or use my wonder clips, using these notches here to make sure everything's correctly aligned, and then we'll head over to the sewing machine. Okay, so a couple of things about my sewing machine. My sewing machine starts up on a 2.5 stitch length, which is perfect for these types of projects. I also have a 1/4 inch foot here, which means that it just enables me to really easily measure and butt up against that to get that perfect 1/4 inch, which is really good for quilting, but useful in this regard as well because of course we need a 1/4 inch seam. So that just takes a bit of the guesswork out of it. Also my machine does automatically back stitch. So I will be back stitching. I'll try to remember to mention that a couple of times. But if you don't think I'm doing it, I certainly am. It's just, it just happens automatically. So always back stitching at the beginning and the end. So needle down. I'll start off nice and slow. And then it's going back now. And then it goes forward. And then back stitch, and I'll cut those threads and then we'll come back, go back to the mat, line up the next side and come back to the sewing machine. Right, so got my wonder clips in for the next piece, needle down, once again back stitching at the beginning, so a few stitches back and then off we go. Back stitch again, and then we'll cut our threads. Okay, so we've sewn the top piece together. What we are going to do now though is, the thread that I'm using in my machine is just a plain, very light cream colour, and the reason that I've done that, it's really useful when you're sewing multicoloured fabrics because it tends to blend in and really reflect back the light or the colours that are in the fabric. But I am going to now just go to the sewing machine and, the iron, and press, it says to the dark side, so I'm going to press to these more coloured and then the grey side, and then I'm just going to do a quick top stitch just to finish off the top piece. So I'll take you over to the iron. What I want to show you with the ironing is just like if you're making a quilt. We don't want to iron like we normally would because that could potentially distort the seam. So what we're going to do is we're going to do what they call setting the seam. So lots of steam, and we just press down and we just set that seam, okay? And now we'll just gently move this top piece back, and we're just going to press. We're just pressing down. Okay, you can give the rest of it a bit of an iron if you want, but what we don't want to do is just really vigorously rub across that seam just to make sure it stays in shape. Then we'll do the same on the other side. Okay. So once again, just pressing down. And then we'll move this one back as well. Bit of a finger press. Making sure those seams are to one side, and then just pressing. Again, you can give the rest a bit of press if you want. Just press, press, press. Okay, so that's that. Now we're going to go back to the machine, and what I'm going to do is do a top stitch. So I'll bump my stitch width, or length rather, up to about a 3.5. And we're just going to sew very close to the edge on the darker side, just to give that a nice, really polished, professional finish. So we're going to go back to the sewing machine. Right, so I'm going to swap my foot back out again for my standard foot, just so I can get close to the edge of this fabric. And as I say, I'm going to increase my stitch length to 3.5, because this is more of a sort of a decorative finish. And I'm also going to move my needle right across, just so it's nice and close to my edge. Just move it across a little bit, using the centre of my foot to gauge where I'm going to sew, right down the middle with my needle just a little bit off to the right. So needle down. Once again, we will back stitch at the beginning and the end. I'm just going to go slow, just take our time. Back stitch, and then straight down, super close to that where we've sewn our seam. Right down to the end, and then back stitch, and then we'll cut our threads. And hopefully you can see there, it just gives that edge a nice, more professional finish. So now we'll do the other side. And now it'll be a bit harder to see, but we've just got a lovely top stitch just along the right next to that seam as well, and again just gives it that really nice kind of professional finish. So the next step is to take the two pocket pieces. I'm going to pop those together, right sides together, matching up the notches on the sides, and then we're going to sew 1/4 inch straight across the top. Okay. Back stitch and cut our threads. So now what we've got to do, I've gone over and pressed the seams open again. So right underneath the seam line, what we need to do is just tack our elastic just right at the end, so just a few stitches back and forth. So just pop that under again, right under the seam line. So just take a couple of stitches forward and a couple back. And it's done. So that's just secured it in place there. All right. So next we need to fold that out of the way close our seam, matching up the notches there, and we'll just clip this in place all the way down. And effectively what we want to do is ultimately sew a 1/2 inch seam all the way down, which is going to be a casing to house our elastic. So let's do that. I'm going to swap out my foot again. Back stitch at the beginning and the end. Just be careful of that bolt with the elastic there. Back stitch. And there we go, all the way along. The next step is to take a safety pin and thread this elastic all the way back through the casing. So we got that out at the other end, so it's just right at the edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tack this down as well, really, really close to that edge. There you can see, that's obviously the pocket's going to look like with the elastic pulled tight. So the next stage is to take these lines that the Cricut has drawn, and we're going to use those as marks or areas to pleat. So I'm just going to fold them over to about 1/4 inch length. And so I've only got one pocket, so you would do this for both if you've got 2 pockets, but this is going to be on the right side looking at the machine, and that's where I'm going to have my pocket with my tools. So I'm just going to have a look at how that's fitting up, and obviously I can do a bit more pleating there, so I'll do. And that looks about right. So we've done that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do a basting stitch just across the bottom here, just to hold this pleat in place, so that when we go to sew the rest of the bag together, you know, this piece, we don't have to worry about this piece at all. So we'll head back over to the sewing machine and do that. So matching up the notches. We'll pin that first corner, or use our wonder clips to pin that first corner there. And then what I'm going to do is just transfer the wonder clip that I have in place to capture the back fabric as well. Same with the next one, and then we'll pin right at the end. So we're going to do 1/4 inch. Okay. But I'm going to go probably a little bit less than that, just so I'm really close to this edge here, because ultimately once we sew the dust cover together, that will ultimately get hidden away as well. I'm just going to bump up my stitch length because it is a basting stitch. It's not permanent. I will backstitch at the beginning and the end though, just to secure it in place. And backstitch and cut those threads. So now that's firmly attached, it's going to stay nicely in place, and then we're all ready once we go to sew the pocket or the side piece onto the rest of the bag. So the next step, we want to attach the side pieces to the lining. So we've got right sides together, and I'm going to start pinning down here at the corner. But what you'll notice, of course, is that as we start to pin, we'll use our wonder clips, we're starting to get up to this curved area here. So we are going to have to pivot the fabric and basically move it with the curve so that it's effectively going all the way around to the other side. Okay, so now you can see it's actually starting to take shape like the bag. You can see it being the sides of the dust cover there. So now we're going to sew a 1/4 inch all the way around that perimeter, and so we'll go back to the sewing machine. Alright, so I've swapped the camera angle a little bit, hoping that you'll be able to see better. I've also put in my 1/4 inch foot once again. So we just need to go really slowly. Obviously the straight parts are super easy. Back stitching again at the beginning and the end. 1/4 inch seam allowance. So it's all perfectly fine on the straight part. So lift that, get over the notch. The fun part's when we start getting to these curves. So just go slow, keep the fabric together. Use your fingers and your hands and anything else you can just to make sure it's all staying really nicely together. You start going around those curves. Right to the edge and then back stitch and cut your threads. And there we go. So we've sewn all the way around. You can check inside, make sure nothing's been caught, looks good. Don't need to unpick. And then we're going to repeat the process for the other side, making sure that you get the right way around, and then we'll go on to the next stage. Back stitching and cutting the threads. Okay, so now it comes time to attaching our end pieces to our cover. So this part is going to be on the left side of the machine and this is going to be on the right. So effectively, I'm going to attach, what piece is right? This piece. Okay, so this part with the pocket is going to be attached to this grey piece, and this other side will go on the other side. So ultimately we're going to just clip again and repeat the same process on the sewing machine to do both ends. The trick to this part, of course, is going to be making sure that we have all of our notches all lined up, and that when we're sewing, of course, that we're capturing all parts, including the pocketed outside piece. So back stitching again at the beginning and the end, just making sure we're going nice and slowly, needle down. So as you can see, just go slow and you can certainly get around there. Now the moment of truth, turn it out, make sure we caught everything. So we caught the edge of the pocket, along the top, and the other pocket as well. So let's go and do the other side. As well is, here's my little label. So I'm going to input this on the outside outer fabric. So I'm just going to pop that in around where the notches are. So if you're doing the same, you might want to do that there also. Okay, so both the sides are on now. You can see it's taking shape, starting to look like what we'd expect. But just to reduce bulk when we're turning it out, just on the curves, what I like to do is just chop out little triangles just to remove the bulk in those areas, so that when we're turning it out, it'll be a nice curve and not bunched up or bulky. So just cutting down to the seam line, being careful not to, of course, cut those stitches, and I do that just on the curved parts. The more you have, the better. I'm being pretty sparse here, but I think it's going to give me a good result. The outer piece. The other thing that I do is chop off these, because again, they will also create bulk. Alright, so that's done. We'll move on to the next step. So now we're on the final stages, only a couple more steps to go, although you can do a bit more embellishing. But what we're going to do is, we've got these currently inside out. What we want to do is turn one right side out, and I'm actually going to make that my pretty one. Actually, no, I'm going to leave that the way that it is, and I'm going to turn my lining right way out. Okay, and what we want, so we've got the right side out of this one, and this one is still inside out. We're putting right sides together, so we're literally going to put the white lining onto the inside, making sure that we've actually got, because one end of this is higher than the other, so I'm just trying to remember which is which. Making sure that you're getting it the right way around. And this is actually the back of mine, so this is the back corner here. Just make sure, see that you can visually. And then I'm going to turn it around and realise we've got it back to front. Which I think I got. Yep. Okay. So put that one on the inside, match up all the corner seams, and then we're going to clip all the way around. One thing to look out for here is where you've got your seams, it's good to have one go one way. So in this instance, this one's going to my left, and then if we make this one go to the right, to my right, then they'll actually just really snugly kind of lock in there, and you'll get a really, first of all, your seams will match perfectly, but also it'll just fit nice and snug and really super close. It doesn't matter which way you go, but what I would do is go around and match those up, those corners first. And what else? We want to make sure that those seams are beautifully aligned. Last corner here. Again, doesn't matter which way you go, just go in opposite direction. Get them nice and snug up against each other, and then clip. So now we can go around and clip all the other areas. Need to be as generous this time. Okay, so right at the back here, I'm just going to unclip. And I'm just going to leave a gap of about 3 inches, so I can turn it right way around. So that will just indicate to me where I've got to stop and start. So what I'm making sure I'm doing here is just hiding that pocket stitch that we basted earlier onto underneath the new stitching, and then sew all the way around. And this is our first stopping point. We'll just go a little bit further and back stitch. Cut our threads, and we're going to pick it up and move it about 3-inch mark. Put the needle back down. And start sewing again. Alright, back around to the middle, back stitch, alright, and we're done. So here we have it. Here's the bag sewn together all the way around. Now at this time, trim up all your stray threads. Okay, so we find our opening, which is here, and now we're just going to turn the entire project right way out. Let's do that. Just take your time, don't pop those stitches, but if you're back stitched at the beginning and end, should have no issues. Just turn it slowly. Probably particularly when we come to the pocket, it's going to be a little bit tight. Just again, take our time. Okay, the inside lining back in. Let's start to see what this is going to actually look like. Okay, so hopefully you can start to see it obviously coming together, taking shape. We've got our pocket in the back here to hold our tools. It's obviously looking absolutely fantastic. I'm loving it. I'm actually in love with it. So stray there. But what we need to do now, we've got this opening that we turned, so what we need to do is close that. So we're going to take it over to the iron. Hi Leighton.
Hi.
And we're going to give it a good press all the way around, and then we'll go across to the machine and we'll just give it a nice top stitch all the way around the very bottom. So remembering our top stitch is super close to the edge, I'm just going to go right around the perimeter. Again, back stitch at the beginning and at the end, and I have indicated where my opening is around the other side so that I can pay close attention to that. So we're coming up to my opening, so I'm just going to slow down and just take it really easy because I just want to do a really good job here. Make sure I capture that opening and there's no chance of it coming loose. Back stitch. Cut the threads, we're done. So here it is guys, all finished. Pocket on the side, end piece with my cute little tag. Got my tools here, so let's see if it fits. Oh wow. Perfect. My tools on the side. There we go. Okay, let's take a closer look. So hopefully you can see we've got our top stitch detailing here on the side, which makes it really, we've got our detail along the bottom, all nicely top stitched as well around the sides. And here's our pocket, so lots of room to fit more tools, easy to put away, but that looks fantastic. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed that, found that quite useful. If you've got any questions, let me know in the comments and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I hope you make one, and if you do, make sure you post in the group, I'd love to see them. And yeah, thanks very much for joining me. See you later.